The NFL's Final Four in action on this conference championship weekend, looking for those spots in Super Bowl 58. Everybody else already at home, already into the offseason. And for the 8 head coaching vacancies that began this offseason around the NFL, 6 are now filled, including quite a shocker in Atlanta. The Falcons naming not Bill Belichick, their next head coach, but bringing back Raheem Morris, who spent only 11 games as a head coach in Atlanta during the 2020 NFL season, a 4-7 record before he was let go midway through 2020. 4 years technically as a head coach for Raheem Morris, who spent the last 3 seasons as the defensive coordinator with the Los Angeles Rams. He gets the nod as the head man in Atlanta, not Bill Belichick.
This is interesting to me because, again, this isn't a knock on, I don't think Raheem Morris can be a quality head football coach in the NFL, or I'm always under the guise that, guys learn a lot from their first time around when maybe they weren't ready to be a head coach, and it's like, you know what, take a step back, be a coordinator, and then you're going to get your chance again. He's deserving of a head coach spot. The thing I just don't understand here is Arthur Blank's the owner of the Atlanta Falcons. We were led to believe the minute that season ended, that was his guy. They'd bring him right away for an interview with just one-on-one with him and Arthur Blank, and then it's like, hey, meet the rest of the staff. Now, hear me out on this, because it is a cat and mouse game in the NFL. Ben, it's dog eat dog here. And the reason I'm bringing that up is you have an entire front office, general manager, CEO, president of football operations. They want to be in control of what they do. And the reason I bring this up is Raheem Morris is coming to town. He's not saying, I'm not taking this job unless I have the final say in just about everything that happens in this building. And even if you say what you want about Bill Belichick, they had an unbelievable run for the New England Patriots. But when you're coming down, let's just say Rich McKay, longtime CEO there of the franchise or head of football operations, you have a general manager, you have a front office, you have assistant general managers. It's hard for those guys to sit in a room just being human beings and go, all right, we're interviewing this guy. And once he takes this job, if that head coach says he doesn't like what I do, I will be removed immediately. And my say is not going to count anymore here. When you get a coach that comes in and is like, hey, you know what? Everybody's well-liked. He's very team player. He's going to work under any condition. And you can always go to his office and say, hey, look, Raheem, we're going to cut this guy. I know you liked him, but that's the way it is. He goes, okay, I can work with that. Whereas you go into Bill Belichick's office, he goes, you're not cutting that guy. And if you ever come into my office again, I'm going to go tell Arthur Blank that I don't want you in football operations anymore. It's a completely different world. But also, sometimes you cut your nose off to spite your face. If Bill Belichick is the best coach for that franchise, shame on you if you're just saying, hey, I'm looking out for number one, and that's me. Or I know I'm still going to have a job if Raheem Morris is here. Or if Bill Belichick is here, I don't know what I'm going to do with my day because it won't be in football operations because I have to run everything by Bill Belichick. That had to be at least a part of what got hired here for Raheem Morris.
Has to be a part of it, right? And it's really interesting. And we'll talk about Bill Belichick and any potential suitors and what might be next for Belichick. But that's part of the reason the disastrous last 4 years culminated with a 4-13 record this past year in Foxborough really played out the way it did. Not Bill Belichick, the head coach or the defensive mind as we see it, but Bill Belichick, the front office executive that swung and missed on virtually every decision, whether it was in the draft, the weird free agency spending that didn't really pan out except for 1 year, and then where it left the franchise moving forward. A 24-year run in New England that led to 6 Super Bowls and the second all-time winningest head coach in the National Football League. But I wonder what that was like in conversations for Belichick around the NFL, and namely in Atlanta, in the multiple interviews that he had in terms of how much organizational control he was willing to not have, Donnie, but maybe give up. Raheem Morris, before being named the head coach of Atlanta in 2020, was with the franchise for 5 seasons, dating back to 2015. He was the assistant head coach. He worked with Dan Quinn. They had that pedigree and that familiarity. Interesting to bring him back when he was let go midway through 2020. 3 years in Tampa Bay as well. The overall win-loss record for Raheem Morris as an NFL head coach, 21-38, a .356 win percentage. Not saying he can't get it done now, but it is an interesting move, especially when all eyes were on Bill Belichick in the ATL. A lot of talent in Atlanta, quarterback questions to be figured out. The Falcons with somewhat of a stunning move yesterday. Also somewhat of a stunning move in Charlotte. Dave Canales named the new head coach of the Carolina Panthers, who spent last year, 2023, as the offensive coordinator in Tampa Bay, helped resurrect the NFL career of Baker Mayfield. But last year was his first year not in a positional coaching spot around the NFL. He had spent the previous 13 seasons in Seattle under Pete Carroll before going to Tampa.
This is an interesting one, too, because there's a lot of narratives that we're going over, right? And it's not knocking. This might work out and be a wonderful hire. Same thing with Raheem Morris down in Atlanta. But it seems like we're asking more questions on this cycle than ever before. And the reason being is there was over a half dozen coaching spots that were available with rock star head coaches that were available to step into it. And if you said to me or the Carolina fan base, when you fired Frank Reich at midseason, you go, okay, look, we got an owner that's a little bit hot-headed. He's got a ton of money to work with here. It's one of very few jobs in the world that you can take. We should be getting a candidate that when we sign this guy, it's going to be like, thank goodness we got our guy. I can't wait for next season. And it turns out to be Dave Canales. And again, isn't a knock on what he did in Tampa, but let's be serious. There's one offensive coordinator that we're looking at with Ben Johnson, with Boomer Esiason came on with us and said, basically, he's going to the Commanders. That's why I'm not hearing his name. That's a done deal behind the scenes, and we'll see if that comes into it. But if Ben Johnson would have been the new head coach in Carolina, Ben, I would say to be like, that's a grand slam. I know they don't have a first-round pick next, but this is the guy you needed. This is the perfect situation here now for Bryce Young. You take a look at Tampa. Okay, 18th in the NFL here, and he resurrected Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield was the number one overall pick in the NFL, and had he not got hurt in Cleveland, was still a competent quarterback with a playoff win under his belt already. It's not as if he took an undrafted free agent and made him competent. And also, Ben, let's revert back to what Tampa Bay was this season. If Tampa Bay does not play in their conference or their division, and another team in the NFC, they don't even make the playoffs. But again, I'm not knocking the hire. I just want to go into that. Well, did anybody look at that situation and go, I know I'm going to get a big paycheck, but do I want this owner that might every Monday morning come into my office and yell and scream at me and slam the door on the way out? I don't want to work under those conditions, which is why you got Dan Morgan, who might be a fine general manager, but is that the in-house guy that David Tepper just likes, and that's the only guy that was actually going to take those jobs?
Yeah.
There's a lot of question marks here in Carolina. It could all work out, Ben, in the end, but I got a lot more doubts right now than I do positive thoughts.
Baker Mayfield threw for more than 4,000 yards this year, top 10 in the NFL throughout the regular season. Had one of the 10 best passer ratings around the National Football League as well. But Donnie's right. The metrics aren't outstanding. The Bucs were the second worst offense into the postseason. Out of the 14 NFL playoff teams, only the Steelers were worse. Think about how the Bucs clinched the division. A 9-0 win in Carolina, by the way, on an audition for David Tepper without scoring a single offensive touchdown. And what is so interesting to me is whatever way you slice it, Dave Canales is tied now to Bryce Young. He has to be fully bought in to the number one overall pick in 2023, whose rookie season was not good. Mediocre would be too kind. He threw for more than 250 yards, did Bryce Young, in his 16 starts. Just once, that was on Christmas Eve against Green Bay, 312 yards and 2 touchdowns. His best performance by far. He was under 200 yards, double-digit times this year. 11 touchdowns, Donnie, to only 10 INTs for Bryce Young. Now Dave Canales is going to be tasked with making Bryce Young look like the number one overall pick we all expected in 2023.
Look, and he might be able to do that. Again, we're trying to get on a positive note, but with all these, like, if you tell Vrabel's going to be the coach of Carolina, hey, it looks like that franchise is back on solid ground here. There's just too many question marks on a franchise that can't afford it, Ben.
That's a really good point, Donnie. Back to the conference championship Sunday Cats next.